On our newscast tonight, the fate of the captain of the Sewol-ho ferry who has been charged with negligent homicide is sealed. Prosecutors demanded a death sentence for his role in the April ferry disaster and life imprisonment for 3 crew members. Seoul wants confirmation on a planned round of inter-Korean talks, but all Pyongyang wants to focus on is stopping anti-North Korean propaganda leaflets from crossing the border. Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko celebrates a win in the country's parliamentary election. The early vote count shows overwhelming support for ending the separatist war and pursuing democratic reforms. Stay with us for these stories and more coming up on Early Edition at 6. It's Monday, October 27th here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Hwang, Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here with us, Ji-hye, today.
Thank you.
Well, we begin the newscast with the ongoing trial for those responsible for April's tragic Sewol-ho ferry disaster.
Today, prosecutors demanded the death penalty for the captain who was charged with negligent homicide and life in prison for other key crew members. Kwon Soa starts us off.
The prosecution has spoken. It is seeking the strongest punishment possible in Korean law for Sewol-ho ferry captain Lee Joon-seok, the death penalty. They have also demanded life in prison for 3 key crew members and 15 to 30 years in prison for 11 others. More than 6 months have passed since the tragic Sewol-ho ferry accident left more than 300 passengers dead or missing. And after deliberating through 29 trial sessions and poring over 20,000 pages of evidence, prosecutors have made their penalty requests for 15 crew members for charges of negligence of duty and violation of maritime law, which demands they should have been the last to leave the ship. The crew was accused of fleeing the ship without evacuating hundreds of passengers left on board, but repeatedly instructing them to stay put in their cabins. After prosecutors indicted 4 senior crew members, including Captain Lee Joon-seok in May, on charges of murder by willful negligence, the public's attention has been focused on whether they would be handed the death penalty. Prior to Monday's session, Captain Lee was said to have wished for punishment, admitting to all of the charges against him, with the exception of murder. Some families of the victims who were in the gallery for Monday's session had earlier pleaded for the defendants to be charged with the maximum penalty possible. Sentences are expected to be issued in the 3rd week of next month. Kwon Soa, Arirang News.
Now, the prospects for a planned round of high-level talks between the 2 Koreas remain very much in doubt. South Korea has proposed meeting this Thursday.
But instead of responding to the offer, North Korea has launched another protest against the anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns being staged by South Korean activists. Our Hwang has this report.
Responding to North Korea's protests against the latest anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaign, South Korea on Monday urged the North to come to a planned second round of high-level talks.
We maintain the stance that the government has no legal grounds to ban activities by civic groups. North Korea should give its answer to our proposed date and place for the second round of high-level talks, which the 2 Koreas have previously agreed on.
2 weeks have passed since South Korea proposed holding the talks on October 30th at the border village of Panmunjom. Remaining mum on that offer, the North claimed Sunday that although a daytime leaflet launch on Saturday was scrapped, the South Korean government turned a blind eye to a group of activists who sent about 20,000 leaflets that night. It warned that high-level talks will not be held under the current atmosphere. Experts say the planned meeting could be postponed indefinitely.
Unless the South Korean government shows a firm determination to prevent further leaflet campaigns or North Korea promises never to bring up the issue again, the possibility of talks between the 2 sides is very low.
A group of South Korean activists says it will send more anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border this Thursday. And experts say the question of whether the government decides to step in this time or not will determine the direction of inter-Korean relations down the road. Hwang, Arirang News.
And while inter-Korean relations remain frosty, Pyongyang has so far refused to participate in a forum the Korean government will hold later this week on issues like energy security and nuclear safety.
Right, and those topics hold extra meaning here in Korea in the face of Pyongyang's nuclear threat. Plus, the country is the world's 5th largest user of nuclear power.
To help us discuss the issues in depth, we have Professor Hwang from Seoul National University joining us here in the studio. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
Well, unlike the regional forum that's going to take place later this week, actually a recent survey shows that a number of Koreans actually support the idea of possessing nuclear weapons. What is your analysis on the survey, Professor?
Now, that survey has been made with some political intentions without giving them a full information. When we did again, we find most of Koreans are against going nuclear armament. Because we have 90% of our economy depending on international trade. If we take international sanctions from United States and China and Japan, then our country will be demolished, will be quickly become another North Korea.
And we also have the topic of the revision of a 40-year-old civilian nuclear agreement between Korea and the U.S. Some say we might be rushing it a little bit, that we should take our time with it. And also, perhaps you could also help us dig into the barriers that may be preventing a major breakthrough in the talks.
Right. We have been not very much informed about what's going on inside this negotiation on this important issue that's been made after 41 years of agreement. Now, the Korean nuclear industry has grown to one of the world's 5 best, and we need to explain to our strong ally, United States, that why we need enrichment and also reprocessing for the benefit of both Korea and beyond. However, United States is worried about Korea going nuclear armament. But as I mentioned, it's impossible for Korea to even think about going nuclear. And we need to explain them. And we won't have any ambition to that directions. And in fact, we need to work with the United States together to solve spent nuclear fuel problems, also safety problems, so that we can have a strong team to go all around the world to drive economy of both United States and Korea. Remember, the energy industry alone is the world's largest industry with annual sales of $13 trillion. The next one is the food industry, $5 trillion. And information technology, communication altogether is only $3 trillion. So I would say in this classroom that Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all those people are small people compared with the nuclear engineers in the classroom. So taking into account that aspect, we need to look forward to develop a new engine for growth for the future by utilizing Korea's strengths in nuclear power industry.
I guess that's also explains why Korea should be allowed to reprocess spent fuel. I mean, because it needs to revise the agreement with Washington. I guess that also explains the reason why Korea really needs to revise the agreement with Washington to reprocess spent fuel.
That's a very good question. Even though United Nations and IAEA has international mechanism to prevent both uranium enrichment to make highly enrichment uranium bombs or plutonium bombs out of reprocessing, United States as a dominant nuclear power technology country has made individual agreement, bilateral agreement with almost every country to make sure that international mechanism can work even when there's a loophole, they can handle their problems properly. So we signed agreement with the United States in 1974, and now after 40 years, we have to revise. And now the situation is changed during the last 40 years. We were like a primary school student at that time. Now we are truly world best professionals. However, U.S. is still worrying about possibility of Korea going nuclear armament, which is untrue.
Well, you did mention that nuclear power is big fries compared to small fries like food or IT industries. So I guess we should focus on this being the new growth engine for Korea, since we do rely 1/3 of our power source in nuclear power stations, and we have been exporting nuclear power stations and our know-how and technology to even oil-rich countries like the UAE. What is your vision for maybe the next 10 or 20 years in Korea's nuclear industry?
Right, there's such a huge stake ahead. We need to solve immediate problems. The first, we have to solve safety issues. Second, we have to solve high-level waste issues. And third, we have to have option to provide nuclear fuels to our customer countries in a stable manner. So for this purpose, we have to have good safety regulation by working with our ally, United States. Second, we have to lift the ban in this atomic agreement that we had for the last 40 years. And the last, we have to work together and to make a win-win strategy with the United States.
Right. One thing we do very well is getting this done in a hurry, but hopefully we can focus more on enriching or empowering the security or safety sectors as well in terms of nuclear energy. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Hwang.
Thank you very much.
Do join us again soon.
Thank you.
A Japanese delegation will be in North Korea until Thursday to reinvestigate the abductions of Japanese nationals by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 1980s. The focus for the 10 Japanese officials, including the top diplomat for Asian affairs, Junichi Hara, will be obtaining information on 12 abductees recognized by Tokyo who are still unaccounted for. Pyongyang has maintained that 8 have passed away and 4 never entered the country. The investigation into the Japanese abductees in North Korea began in July in exchange for Tokyo lifting sanctions against Pyongyang and providing humanitarian aid. Now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Monday that he has no intention of revising the 1993 landmark Kwon Statement. Abe's remarks came during a meeting with Korea's National Assembly Speaker Chung Lee-hwa, who is on a 3-day visit to Japan. Abe also said he hoped for more exchanges and improved ties between Korea and Japan. The Kwon Statement, which is based on the accounts of 16 Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery, has been a bone of contention in relations between Seoul and Tokyo.
Shifting our focus outside of the country, over in Ukraine, they are counting the votes from Sunday's parliamentary election. So far, a big win for pro-Europe bloc led by President Petro Poroshenko. Allies seems almost inevitable. Our Connie Lee has this story.
It's an overwhelming win for pro-Western parties in Ukraine's parliamentary elections. Citing exit polls on Sunday evening, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko declared victory, saying more than 3/4 of voters backed his political bloc.
The results of the election bring the firm victory of all democratic pro-European, pro-Ukrainian forces. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to develop, to provide the reform.
Official tallies are expected later Monday, but a partial vote count earlier in the day show that more voters support Poroshenko's plans to end a separatist conflict and carry out democratic reforms. It seems the People's Front Party, led by Poroshenko's ally, Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk, will come in second out of 29 other parties, with over 21% of the vote so far. In light of the victory, President Poroshenko said he will start talks on forging a new coalition in parliament come Monday. The election comes 7 months after the revolution in Ukraine that took down former President Viktor Yanukovych, and during a time when parts of eastern Ukraine remain under the unofficial control of pro-Russia separatists. However, the voting shows that the country is trying to steer clear of Russia and instead take a pro-European path. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
From West Africa to the United States and Europe, cases of Ebola are spreading around the globe, as are the fears. Here in Asia, nations are taking measures to prevent an outbreak while also preparing for a worst-case scenario, rather. Our Connie Kim reports.
Fears of a possible Ebola outbreak in Asia have begun to spread following confirmation that healthcare workers in the United States and Spain have contracted the virus after treating patients in West Africa. Compounding concerns are the travel habits of those living in the three countries hardest hit by Ebola. Analyzing data dating back to the start of last year, medical journal Lancet says China and India were among the top 15 travel destinations for people from Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. More than 8,600 people have traveled to the southern Chinese province of Guangdong Province from West Africa since late August. And acknowledging the need to bolster measures, China's National Health and Family Planning Commission called for medical institutions to upgrade infection control precautions by the end of October. Over in India, officials related to health, civil aviation, and shipping convened this month to prepare for a possible Ebola outbreak. India, currently the world's second most populous country, has less than 1/5 the number of hospital beds compared to China per 1,000 people. Korea is also getting ready for a worst-case scenario. Following an announcement last week of plans to deploy medics to West Africa to help with efforts there, the health ministry pledged to designate 2 additional hospitals for the diagnosis and treatment of Ebola, bringing the total to 19. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to announce an end to its multi-billion-dollar bond buying program when it meets later this week. The International Monetary Fund says that could deal quite a blow to the local economy, adding, however, that it's too soon to hit the panic button. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The International Monetary Fund says Korea could take the heaviest blow among the countries in Asia if the U.S. exit from quantitative easing sparks a sudden rise in U.S. interest rates. Romain Duval, the IMF's head of the Regional Studies Division of the Asia-Pacific Department, says that it is quite possible that Asia's fourth largest economy will experience a shock as a result of the changes in U.S. monetary policy because Korea is vulnerable to external shifts. He says the impact will likely lead to a capital flight and a slowdown in exports to the United States. The IMF predicts Korea's growth rate could drop by nearly 1 percentage point if the U.S. interest rate were to rise suddenly, a move that's expected if the U.S. Federal Reserve announces an end to its multi-billion-dollar bond buying program when it meets later this week. Other Asian countries are likely to experience smaller changes. India's growth rate is expected to drop by less than 0.2 percentage point. But despite the dismal outlook for Korea, Duval says there's no need to panic just yet. The effects of the impact will be minimized because Seoul is able to utilize its financial and monetary policies to deal with external changes. Duval says it all comes down to how the Korean government handles the effects of the rise in the U.S. interest rate, saying it should pursue austerity measures and let its currency depreciate in the event of capital outflows. The IMF says the Korean economy could drop into the low 3% range following a U.S. interest rate hike, while Seoul projects the economy will grow to around 4% next year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And in addition to hosting the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference right now, Korea has been re-elected to the Council of the International Telecommunications Union, the information and communications arm of the United Nations. This is the 7th time Korea has been elected a council member. Korea, along with China and India, garnered one of the 13 seats allocated for the Asia and Australasia region. As part of the 48-member council, Korea will be involved in making policies to ensure the ITU is on top of the telecommunications industry. Korea's term will start in January and continues for 4 years until the year 2018.
Korea's film industry has taken off in recent years and currently ranks as the 7th largest in the world.
And I'm sure many people will agree just as important as the content is, of course, who you're watching with. But more than that is the cinema experience. That's where we're focusing on where those movies are being shown here in Korea.
On this week's Industry Insight, our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won reports on the success of the country's multiplexes at home and how they're expanding abroad as well.
4 out of 5 movie theaters in Korea are multiplexes, and of them, more than 40% are CGV branches, the #1 movie theater chain in Korea. CGV opened Korea's very first multiplex in Seoul in 1998. Since then, they have launched a number of innovative features, including the nation's first 3D and 4D screens, as well as Korea's first premium screen called Gold Class in 2001. The cost for this premium seat is 3 times higher than a normal ticket, but you can enjoy free snacks and beverages, as well as the spacious and comfy sofa where you can relax and enjoy the movie. Another key to this success is the Cultureplex, offering more than movies. There's gourmet popcorn, exhibitions, and performances, giving moviegoers the whole package of cultural pampering.
CGV provides better membership benefits compared to other movie chains. There are also a lot of restaurants nearby, and it has a good concession menu.
Number 2 in the field is Lotte Cinema, taking up about 35% of the market. It's looking to take its motto of happy memories further with its newest theater at Lotte World Mall in Seoul. It's Asia's largest multiplex with 21 screens, one of which is the world's largest projection screen as recognized by Guinness World Records.
It offers premium facilities with a lot of amenities. The interior is modern and clean.
But industry insiders agree that the domestic market doesn't have much room for additional growth. About 200 million movie tickets were sold in Korea last year, meaning each person in Korea watched more than 4 films a year, and that's even higher than the US figure.
We can say Korea's movie theater industry has pretty much reached full saturation and is seeing its limit. That's why CGV and Lotte Cinema are focusing on expanding their presence in foreign markets.
Since CGV opened its first foreign branch in Shanghai in 2006, it's been expanding aggressively overseas with the same strategy of premium service.
It's really about the movie-going experience, the premium experience of sound, screen, seat, as well as a Cultureplex model. Ultimately, those things will work abroad, and that's absolutely part of our strategy.
Lotte Cinema has a similar approach. It started with the Vietnamese market back in 2008.
We are the #2 movie chain in Vietnam, and we aim to be #1 by 2018. By then, we hope to have at least 60 branches in Vietnam and in China, with a goal of raking in some $300 million in annual revenue.
Both CGV and Lotte Cinema say they are focused on China and Southeast Asia for the initial phase of their global investment. But ultimately, they want to expand elsewhere based on things that haven't worked for them here in Korea. Both hope that in the coming decades, their branches that spread throughout the world rake in more revenue than those based here in Korea. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
it looks like more and more people will be flocking to cineplexes or indoor activities because it's feeling a lot like winter right now.
Yes, it does. Let's now turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the latest. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. Today was very chilly. In fact, we had the coldest morning of the season today here in Seoul at about 6.1 degrees. Now, the highs went up near the 20s during the day, but it is expected to drop again overnight below into the teens, leading to a winter-like morning. Now, tomorrow we can expect another sunny day nationwide, but expect colder temperatures ranging from 14 to 20 degrees, depending on the location. And currently, the nation is under a very clear sky with strong winds blowing nationwide, and due to a dry air that's coming down from the north, and because of that, dry air advisory has been issued for Gangwon province as well. Now, clear sky is expected to continue until Wednesday, which will get cloudy and eventually bring some precipitation later on this week. Now, to our readings for tomorrow, so we'll start off the Tuesday morning at 6 degrees before reaching up to 18 in the afternoon. Now, meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will both reach up to 20 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju-an tops out 20 as well, while Dokdo drops down to 14, while Mangkeungang hits 17 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Choy.
I'm Ji-hye. We'll be back at tomorrow, same time.